Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?
I don't know what happened.
What's your name?
Margaret.
Do you have any candy in your bag?
Happened.
Front desk, send up orange juice immediately.
Manager approval is required.
She wasn't supposed to stop. Her cart was 3 doors down. Her shift was half over. Her paycheck was already thinner than it should have been for the amount of work she put into it. But the woman lying on the floor of room 214 wasn't breathing right, and Rosalind Carter had made a promise to herself a long time ago. She would never be the person who just kept walking. By the time her manager found out, it didn't matter that the guest was alive. It only mattered that a cleaning cart had sat unattended in a hallway for 11 minutes. 11 minutes that would cost Rosalind her job. 11 minutes that would, though she couldn't have known it yet, rearrange the rest of her life. This is the story of what a person is willing to lose in order to become who they were always supposed to be. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The Sterling Grand Hotel sat on the edge of downtown, 14 floors of marble and brass that most of its guests would never think twice about. Because thinking twice about a hotel lobby is a luxury reserved for people who've never had to clean one. Rosalind Carter had worked housekeeping there for 6 years. She knew which rooms had leaky faucets before maintenance did. She knew which guests left cash on the nightstand and which ones counted their belongings before they left, as if a woman who made $12 an hour might be tempted to steal a phone charger. She was 39 years old, and most days she told herself that was still young enough to start over, even though she wasn't sure what starting over would even look like anymore. She had a daughter, Aaliyah, 11 years old and sharper than any adult Rosalind knew, and she had rent due on the 2nd of every month whether or not the world cooperated with that schedule. That Tuesday started like any other. Fresh linens, restocked minibars, the particular exhaustion of bending over 300 beds a week. She reached room 214 a little after 2 in the afternoon, expecting an empty room to turn over before the next guest arrived. Instead, she found an elderly woman on the floor beside the bed, gray-faced, hands trembling, purse spilled open beside her as if she'd been reaching for something and never made it. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" Rosalind was already on her knees, already reaching for the woman's wrist to check her pulse, already running through the list of things her Aunt Odessa had drilled into her for 20 years. Odessa had been diabetic since Rosalind was a child, and Rosalind had grown up learning the signs the way other kids learned multiplication tables. Cold sweat, confusion, trembling that wasn't quite a seizure but wasn't far from one either. "I don't know what happened," the woman managed. "I was getting my medication and everything went sideways." "You're okay. I've got you. What's your name?" "Margaret. Margaret Whitfield." "Okay, Margaret. I need you to stay with me. Do you have any juice, any candy, anything with sugar in your bag?" Rosalind was already digging through the spilled purse, past a compact and a set of keys and a folded newspaper, until her fingers found a small tin of mints. Not enough. She needed something faster. She radioed down to the front desk, asked for orange juice sent up immediately, and was told housekeeping wasn't authorized to request room service on behalf of guests without manager approval. She didn't wait for approval. She left her card in the hallway, walked Margaret Whitfield's trembling body over to sit against the headboard, and went down to the vending alcove herself, feeding crumpled dollar bills from her own pocket into a machine that took its time deciding whether or not it wanted her money. When she got back upstairs, Margaret's hands were shaking harder. "Small sips," Rosalind told her, kneeling again, holding the bottle steady against the woman's lips. "Slow. There you go. That's it. You're doing fine." "I'm so sorry," Margaret whispered. "I'm taking up your whole afternoon." "You're not taking up anything. This is exactly where I need to be." It took almost 20 minutes for the color to come back into Margaret's face, for her hands to steady, for her breathing to even out into something that didn't frighten Rosalind anymore. In that time, Rosalind learned that Margaret was 74, that she'd been diabetic for a decade, that she traveled with a driver who'd stepped out to park the car and had no idea anything was wrong. She learned that Margaret's late husband used to check her blood sugar every night before bed, a small ritual of love that Margaret said she missed more than she missed almost anything else about him. By the time the driver returned, panicked and apologetic, Margaret was sitting up, sipping water, insisting she was fine, telling anyone who would listen that the young woman from housekeeping had saved her life. Rosalind didn't think of it that way. She thought of it as the only decent thing to do, the same way she'd think of picking up a dropped grocery bag or holding a door. It didn't occur to her that decency could cost anything. It occurred to her manager immediately. Derek Coyle had been floor manager at the Sterling Grand for 4 years, and he found Rosalind in the hallway outside 214 with an expression that told her before he opened his mouth that this was not going to be a good conversation. "Your cart's been sitting here unattended for over 20 minutes, he said. "Corporate walked the floor an hour ago. If they'd walked it now." "There was a guest having a medical emergency, Derek. There's always something. That's not the point. The point is you left your post." "I left my post to keep a woman from collapsing. And in that time, a guest on the 9th floor reported a missing bracelet from an unlocked room." "Which one of your carts was on 9 today?" Rosalind felt her stomach drop before he even finished the sentence. She knew where this was going because she'd watched it happen to other people before, watched the hotel's math work out in a way that always seemed to land on the housekeeping staff and never on the guests, never on management, never on the corporate quotas that made every small mistake into a fireable offense. "I wasn't even on 9 today," she said. "You know I wasn't. I know what I have to report. And what I have to report is an unattended cart, a missing item, and a guest complaint. My office." Now, she followed him down 2 flights of stairs with her heart pounding, replaying the last hour in her mind, trying to figure out where exactly kindness had turned into a liability. In Derek's office, the conversation was short and it was final. Corporate had been tightening the screws on shrinkage and complaints all quarter. Derek needed to show results by Friday or face his own review. Rosalind Carter, 6 years of a clean record, was the easiest number to move. "I'm not writing you up," he said, not meeting her eyes. "I'm letting you go. Effective today. 6 years, Derek. Not one complaint in 6 years. And today there were 2. I'm sorry. I really am." He didn't sound sorry. He sounded like a man doing arithmetic, subtracting a person from a column because the column needed to balance. She walked out of the Sterling Grand that afternoon with a bag containing her uniform, her badge deactivated at the door by a security guard who wouldn't look her in the eye, and a bus ticket home that suddenly felt heavier in her hand than it ever had before. The apartment Rosalind shared with her daughter and her aunt sat on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades, in a neighborhood the city liked to describe as up and coming, in every grant proposal and never actually invested in. She climbed the stairs slower than usual that day, trying to figure out how she was going to say the words out loud, because saying them out loud would make them real in a way that thinking them hadn't yet. Aaliyah was at the kitchen table when she walked in, homework spread out in front of her, and she looked up with the particular radar children develop for their parents' bad days. "You're home early," she said. "Why do you look like that?" "Like what, baby?" "Like the day you got the call about Dad." Aaliyah's father had left when she was 4, and though the specifics had faded, the shape of that day, the particular quiet way Rosalind had closed the front door, had never left her daughter's memory. "You're doing the quiet thing. You don't do the quiet thing unless something's wrong." Odessa emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel, 61 years old and sharper than any Dr. Rosalind had ever taken her to. "Sit down and tell us," she said, not as a request. "I got fired." "For what?" Aaliyah's voice cracked with the particular outrage only an 11-year-old can summon on her mother's behalf. "For helping a woman whose blood sugar dropped at the hotel. She looked exactly like you do sometimes, Andy. Same shaking, same gray in the face. I couldn't just walk past." Odessa sat down slowly across from her. "Of course you couldn't. You're my sister's daughter. We don't walk past people. And now I'm your sister's daughter with no job. 2 weeks until Aaliyah's school fees are due, and a manager who called it a cost instead of a life." "We'll figure it out," Odessa said. "We always do. I'm tired of figuring it out, Andy. I'm tired of being one phone call away from losing everything we've got. I gave that woman juice out of my own pocket and sat with her on a cold floor while my whole job, burned down around me, and I don't regret it. But God, I'm just so tired." Odessa reached across the table and took her hand. "You know I've told you about your grandmother. The one who gave her last $20 to a stranger at a bus stop when we had nothing left for groceries that week. I've heard the story, Auntie. Then hear it again, because you need it today more than you've ever needed it. Your grandmother looked at me when I was furious with her, and she said, If I can't help somebody when I've got $20, what makes you think I'll help when I've got 20,000? The amount never mattered, baby. The person you are when nobody's watching is the only thing that ever mattered. Grandma ended up losing that apartment 2 years later. Your grandmother ended up with a daughter who grew up watching her mother choose kindness even when it cost her something. That's not nothing, Rosalind. That's the only inheritance some of us ever get. That night, after Aaliyah had gone to bed, Rosalind sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, doing the math she'd been avoiding all evening. Rent, utilities, Aaliyah's school fees, the payment plan on Odessa's medication that insurance only partially covered. She had $412 in savings and no job. She thought about applying to the diner 2 blocks over, or the warehouse that was always hiring, or the dozen other jobs that would pay less than housekeeping had and demand just as much. She thought, too, about the 2 years she'd spent in a medical assistant certificate program before Aaliyah was born, before her mother's death, before the loans that never seemed to care whether or not you were grieving. She'd been good at it, better than good. Her instructor had told her more than once that she had the kind of instincts you couldn't teach, the kind that came from actually paying attention to people instead of just their charts. She hadn't thought about that version of herself in years. It felt like a photograph of someone else's life. The following days blurred into a routine of job applications and rejection emails, of stretching groceries further than they wanted to stretch, of Aaliyah quietly doing her homework without being asked twice, because she seemed to sense her mother didn't have room for one more thing to manage. Odessa's blood sugar had 2 rough days that week, and Rosalind sat with her through both of them the way she'd sat with Margaret Whitfield, except this time there was no manager to fire her for it, only the low hum of worry that never fully switched off. She did not know that 4 miles across town, in a house with more rooms than her entire apartment building, Margaret Whitfield had spent those same days telling her son a story he could not stop thinking about. Jonathan Blackwell was 52 years old, the founder and CEO of Blackwell Technologies, a man whose company's software ran in the back offices of half the hospitals in the country. He had built an empire on data and efficiency, on the cold comfort of numbers that always added up if you were patient and precise enough. He was, by his own admission, not always the easiest man to slow down. Mom, you have a driver, a personal shopper. Why were you even at that grocery store, at that hotel, buying your own things? He'd asked variations of this question 3 times since she'd told him what happened, each time missing the point in a slightly different way. Because I wanted to feel like a person who still runs her own errands, Jonathan. I'm old, not dead. Margaret sat across from him in his office, having insisted on the meeting herself rather than waiting for one of his assistants to schedule it around his calendar. Now sit down and actually listen to me, because I'm not going to say this twice. I'm listening. A young woman found me on the floor of my hotel room. She didn't know who I was. She didn't check my purse for identification or wait for someone more qualified to arrive. She got down on the floor with me, in her work uniform, and she talked to me like I mattered until the world stopped spinning. And when it was over, her manager fired her for it. Right there, the same afternoon, while I was still shaking in a hotel bed 4 floors above her. Jonathan set down the pen he'd been turning over in his hands. Fired her. For leaving her cart unattended. For daring to be a human being instead of a schedule. That girl saved my life, and they dismantled hers for it in the same afternoon, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it since. What do you want me to do? I want you to find her. Not to write a check and feel better about yourself, Jonathan. I've watched you do that before, and it's not what I'm asking. I want you to find out what she actually needs. Not what you assume a person like her needs. What she needs. It took his assistant, a meticulous young woman named Brooke Simmons, less than a day to track down Rosalind Carter's address through hotel employment records and a conversation with a former coworker who still worked the front desk. Brooke found herself standing on the 3rd floor landing of an apartment building 2 days later, notebook in hand, feeling distinctly out of place in a blazer that had cost more than the building's monthly maintenance fee probably allowed for. Are you Rosalind Carter? Depends who's asking. My name is Brooke Simmons. I work for Jonathan Blackwell. His mother is Margaret Whitfield. I believe you helped her last week at the Sterling Grand. Rosalind blinked. The woman with the low blood sugar. Is she all right? She's more than all right, thanks to you. Mr. Blackwell would like to meet with you, if you're willing. Blackwell. Like Blackwell Technologies. That Blackwell. Rosalind almost laughed. The woman I sat with on a cold hotel floor is worth more than every building on this block combined. And nobody thought to mention that while I was digging through my own pockets for juice money. For what it's worth, Brooke said, I don't think she would have wanted you to know. I think that's rather the point. 3 days later, Rosalind found herself in the lobby of Blackwell Technologies' downtown tower, a space with ceilings so high they seemed to swallow sound, waiting for an elevator that would take her up to meet a man whose net worth she couldn't fully picture even after Brooke had told her the number twice. Your lobby is bigger than my apartment building, Rosalind said when Jonathan finally met her. Just so you know, that's the kind of impression this makes. Jonathan almost smiled. My mother says you saved her life. I gave her orange juice and sat with her on the floor. That's not saving a life. That's just paying attention. Most people don't pay attention, Miss Carter. My grandmother was diabetic. I learned early that you either learn the signs or you learn them the hard way, usually too late to matter. I also know I was fired for it, which I understand. I left my post. Things got complicated on the floor while I was gone. I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me. You're being remarkably fair about a situation that cost you your income. Oh, I'm furious, Rosalind said, and something in her voice cracked just slightly around the edges of the word. I just don't have the luxury of showing it for very long. Furious doesn't pay the light bill. Jonathan studied her for a long moment. So what do you need, Miss Carter? Not what you think you should ask for. What do you actually need? I didn't help your mother for a reward. That's not what I asked you. I asked what you need. Rosalind was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that comes from a question nobody has bothered to ask you in a very long time. My mother told me, my aunt, she said you should know I was 2 years into a medical assistant program before my daughter was born. Before my mother passed, and the loan stopped waiting for anybody's grief. I had a 3.7 average. Then I dropped out and got a job at a hotel, and that was 6 years ago. What if you could go back? Go back. The Blackwell Foundation runs a healthcare training scholarship. Full tuition, materials, a living stipend for the duration of the program. I'm not offering you money, Miss Carter. I'm offering you the thing you had to give up. I can't accept that. Why not? Because I'm 39 with an 11-year-old and an aunt who needs looking after every other week. And I can't waltz back into a classroom like I'm 23 with nothing on the line. If I take this and I fail, I've wasted your foundation's money and proven every doubt I've ever had about myself right. It was at this point that Margaret Whitfield herself walked into the room, having insisted on being present for exactly this part of the conversation. Rosalind, it's good to see you standing instead of on a floor for once. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm glad you're okay. I watched you check my pulse that day. You counted out loud to keep me calm without even realizing you were doing it. You don't learn that from a training manual you half remember. I learned it a long time ago, before I had to leave school. So here's my question, Margaret said, settling into the chair beside her son. If money is the only thing standing between you and finishing that degree, then it's already handled. So what's actually stopping you? Rosalind exhaled slowly. Fear. I'm scared I'll go back and fail all over again. What else? I'm scared I'll be the oldest person in every room. That my daughter will think I chose school over her. That I'll get close to something I actually want, and life will find a way to pull it out of my hands again, the way it always has. Margaret nodded slowly, as if this was exactly the answer she'd been waiting to hear. Good, she said. Scared means it still matters to you. The day it stops scaring you is the day you should worry. The conversation with Odessa that night went about as Rosalind expected, which was to say it went in circles until Odessa finally cut through all of them with the particular bluntness reserved for family. Let me make sure I understand what you're telling me, Odessa said, arms crossed, standing in the kitchen doorway like a woman preparing to deliver a verdict. The lady you helped is a billionaire's mother. Yes. And they want to pay for your entire medical program. Tuition, books, a stipend to live on while you study. That's what they said. And you told them you'd think about it. I panicked, Auntie. Rosalind Denise Carter. Don't full name me. You have prayed every single night for 5 years for a way back into that world. Lord, show me a door. And a door walked right up your own street and knocked, and you told it to wait while you thought it over. It's complicated. Aaliyah, Odessa called toward the hallway. Come tell your mother what you think. Aaliyah appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, having clearly been listening from her room the entire time. Are you going back to school, Mom? Maybe, baby. It's complicated. If you become a nurse, will you be my nurse when I'm sick? Rosalind felt something in her chest give way just slightly. Of course I would, sweetheart. That's not exactly how it works, but yes. But you'd be a real one? With the badge and everything? Yeah, a real one. Then go, Aaliyah said, with the simple finality only a child can offer. I'll be fine. Auntie makes good soup. Out of the mouths of babes, Odessa said, and Rosalind found herself laughing for the first time in what felt like weeks. All right, Rosalind said. I'll do it. But I have conditions. When she called Brooke back the following morning, she laid them out one by one, and to her surprise, nobody on the other end argued. No special treatment in the classroom. Same coursework, same exams, same clinical rotations as every other student in the program. If she failed, she would fail on her own merits, and nobody would call the program director on her behalf. She would also keep working part-time, because she needed her own income, and because she needed Aaliyah to see her mother still putting in effort with her own two hands, not simply living off someone else's generosity. We actually have part-time positions at the foundation, Brooke told her. Flexible hours, built around a class schedule. If you're interested, a real job, real work, not some made-up title so I can feel good about cashing a check. You're making it very difficult for a billionaire's foundation to be generous, Ms. Carter. Good, Rosalind said. That's exactly the point. Her first week back at Westbridge Community College felt like stepping into a life that belonged to someone 13 years younger, and for the first several days, she was certain everyone around her could tell. She sat in the back of her anatomy lecture, noticing she was easily the oldest person in the room by at least a decade, watching 22-year-olds take notes on laptops while she still preferred a legal pad out of habit. It was in that lecture hall that she met Priya Nair, a 26-year-old who'd left a corporate accounting job to pursue nursing after her own mother's long illness, and who sat down next to Rosalind on the second day of class with the directness of someone who'd already decided they were going to be friends. This professor moves through pharmacology like the material owes him money, Priya said. I'm Priya. I've already decided I hate anatomy, and I need somebody to suffer through it with me. Rosalind. And I think I love anatomy and hate pharmacology, so we should be a good team. Deal. Want to study together? I'm being destroyed by this material. It's destroying me too. Let's be destroyed together. That friendship became the scaffolding that held her first semester together. Late nights at the library, flashcards traded over cheap coffee, the particular comfort of having someone else who understood the specific exhaustion of rebuilding a life from its foundation up. She called Odessa most nights after Aaliyah went to bed, sometimes at 2 in the morning after finishing a paper, just to hear a familiar voice. Grandma, you up? I'm always up at this hour, baby. What's the time? A little after 2. I just finished my pharmacology paper. Are you eating anything besides stress? I had a granola bar somewhere in there. That's not food, Rosalind. I got a 93 on my anatomy midterm. You already told me that twice tonight. I know. Let me say it one more time anyway. 93. Odessa repeated, and Rosalind could hear the smile in it even over the phone. Your granddaddy failed a butchering course 3 separate times, and that's not even the same kind of anatomy, but I like remembering it anyway. I just like hearing you laugh at 2 in the morning. You don't laugh near enough these days. Sometimes I think I'm going to mess all of this up, Auntie. You've been scared since the day you were born. Came out of your mother screaming louder than every other baby on that hospital floor. Doctor said that one's got something to say. You've always had something to say, Rosalind. You just needed somebody willing to listen to it. 8 months into the program, everything that could go sideways at once seemed determined to do exactly that. Aaliyah, normally an easy child in school, was suspended for 3 days after a fight with a classmate who'd mocked her for wearing the same shoes 2 weeks in a row. Odessa's blood sugar had a stretch of dangerous instability that sent her to urgent care twice in a single month, insurance covering less of it than anyone had hoped. And Rosalind's part-time hours at the foundation had been quietly reduced when a new department head reorganized the budget, leaving her with less income right as her savings had finally started to recover. She sat at the kitchen table one night in March with 3 textbooks open, a stack of unpaid bills, and a voicemail from Aaliyah's school still unreturned, and felt something in her that had been holding steady for 8 months finally begin to slip. I can't do this, she told Priya over the phone, voice thin in a way Priya had never heard from her before. I thought I could hold all of it together, but I can't. Aaliyah needs me. Odessa needs me, and I'm failing my clinical rotation evaluation because I haven't slept more than 4 hours in 6 days. You're not failing anything yet. I'm 1 bad week away from failing everything, Priya. Maybe I should just withdraw for this semester. Regroup. Come back when things are calmer. Things are never going to be calmer, Rosalind. You know that better than anybody. There's no version of your life where everything quiets down long enough for you to feel ready. I've watched you for 8 months. You don't wait for ready. You just go. Rosalind almost withdrew that week. She had the form open on her laptop, cursor hovering over the submit button, when Odessa called her into the living room instead. Sit down, Odessa said, easing herself into her chair with the careful movements that had become more common that year. I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Okay. Were you ready to raise Aaliyah alone at 28, with her father gone and no plan in place? No. Did you do it anyway? Yes. Were you ready to go back to school at 39, competing against kids half your age? No. Did you do it anyway? Yes, Auntie, but were you ready to kneel down on a cold hotel floor next to a dying stranger, not knowing if it would cost you your job? No. Did you do it anyway? Yes. Then when, Rosalind, are you finally going to stop waiting to feel ready and just trust that you already are exactly what this moment needs? When did you become a motivational speaker, Annie? The day my granddaughter started needing one every other Tuesday, apparently. Odessa reached over and closed the laptop gently. Withdraw if you truly need to. I will love you exactly the same either way. But don't withdraw because you're scared. Withdraw only if it's actually true that you can't. Rosalind didn't submit the form that night. Instead, she called her clinical instructor the next morning, explained honestly what the last month had looked like, and asked whether there was any flexibility in her rotation schedule rather than an outright withdrawal. Her instructor, a woman named Carol Jennings who had seen 100 students hit exactly this wall, arranged a modified schedule that gave Rosalind 2 additional weeks to complete her hours without penalty. Aaliyah's suspension resolved itself into a longer conversation about the shoes, about money, about what her classmates could and couldn't see when they looked at her, and Rosalind used a portion of that month's stipend to buy her daughter a new pair, not out of guilt, but out of the simple recognition that her daughter had been carrying a weight of her own this whole time, quietly, without complaint. Odessa's blood sugar stabilized once her medication dosage was adjusted, and the foundation, upon learning through Brooke about the reduced hours, quietly restored Rosalind's schedule to its original terms, an accommodation Rosalind almost refused out of pride before Brooke pointed out that fixing an administrative mistake wasn't the same thing as special treatment. By May, Rosalind had pulled her clinical evaluation back up to a passing mark, submitted her final papers a full day ahead of deadline for the first time all year, and stood in her kitchen at midnight with Priya on speakerphone, the two of them laughing about how close they'd both come to quitting in the same terrible month without ever telling each other at the time. 2 years after the afternoon she'd been fired from the Sterling Grand, Rosalind Carter stood in a cap and gown in the gymnasium of Westbridge Community College, 3rd row from the front, Aaliyah and Odessa in the audience along with a face she hadn't expected to see there at all. "Congratulations, graduate," Margaret Whitfield said afterward, meeting her near the folding chairs with a small wrapped box in her hands. "Mrs. Whitfield, you came. I wouldn't have missed it. I brought you something." Rosalind opened the box to find a single bottle of orange juice, the same brand, the same size as the one she'd bought with crumpled dollar bills from a vending machine 2 years earlier. "You remembered the brand?" "I remember everything about that day, Rosalind. Your hands were shaking, but your voice never wavered once. You told the people in that hallway they could wait, and that I couldn't. Nobody had said anything like that to me in years. Most people talk about me, around me, or over me. You talked to me. You would have done the same for anyone. I hope that's true. But hoping and actually doing are 2 very different things. You chose to act. Most people, when it costs them something, choose to look away instead." That evening, Aaliyah, now 13, threw her arms around her mother in the parking lot. "Mom, you're really a nurse now. For real. For real, baby. So now when I'm sick, you take care of me like it's your actual job?" "I always took care of you, Aaliyah. That part was true long before the badge." "Yeah, but now you've got the badge to prove it." A month later, Jonathan Blackwell called Rosalind with an offer that took her several days to fully believe. The foundation was opening a new community health clinic in Fairview Heights, the same neighborhood where Rosalind had grown up, offering free primary care, diabetes management, and mental health services to a population the healthcare system had spent decades quietly overlooking. He wanted Rosalind to lead the nursing staff. "I just graduated, Jonathan. I'm not remotely ready to run an entire clinic floor." "You weren't ready to raise a daughter alone at 28, Odessa said later that night, when Rosalind relayed the conversation. "You weren't ready to go back to school at 39. You weren't ready to sit on a cold floor with a dying stranger and risk everything you had. Did you do all of it anyway?" "You already know the answer, Auntie." "Then when, Rosalind, are you finally going to stop waiting to feel ready?" The Fairview Heights Community Health Clinic opened its doors on a bright morning in October. Free primary care and diabetes management and mental health services available to anyone who walked through them. No bill, no judgment, no locked doors for people who couldn't pay. Leading the nursing team was a woman who, 2 years earlier, had been cleaning hotel rooms for $12 an hour. A woman who had lost her job for doing exactly what anyone should do and almost nobody actually does. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not terrified standing here," Rosalind told the small crowd gathered for the opening, her voice carrying across a parking lot full of neighbors she recognized from childhood. "I'm terrified nearly every day of my life, if I'm honest with you. But 2 years ago, I learned something on a hotel room floor that I've never forgotten. The thing you're most afraid to do is usually the exact thing you need to do the most. I was afraid to leave my post that day, afraid of what helping a stranger might cost me, afraid to go back to school at 39, afraid to stand here in front of all of you right now. But I did every single one of those frightening things anyway, and I am still standing, and so is every single person I love. So if you are out there today, scared, and the right thing in front of you feels like it costs too much, I am asking you to do it anyway. It very rarely costs as much as your fear tells you it will." Later that afternoon, a teenage girl approached the front desk, hesitant, hovering near the entrance as though she wasn't sure she was allowed inside. "Excuse me, are you the head nurse?" "I am. I'm Rosalind." "What's your name?" "Jasmine. My grandma's diabetic, but she won't come in. She says she can't afford it. I keep telling her it's free, but she doesn't believe anything's really free." "Bring her in, Jasmine. No bill. Not today. Not ever." "Why? You don't even know us." "Because someone I didn't know once stopped for me, on a day when it would have been so much easier to keep walking. And I promised myself that day that I would never be the one who walks past somebody who needed help. Go get your grandmother, Jasmine. We'll be right here." Rosalind watched the girl run back down the block toward the housing complex where Rosalind herself had grown up, and for a long moment she stood in the doorway of the clinic that bore no name, but her own quiet insistence that everyone deserved to be seen, thinking about a hotel hallway, an orange juice bottle, and 11 minutes that had cost her a job and given her back an entire life.